Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell, and today I'm joined by a special guest. I've got Darren Kopic from ARA. He's the CEO up there, has been for quite some time. So Darren, welcome to the show, man.
Mark, thanks for the invitation. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, excited to have someone with your perspective, with your leadership. You sit up there in Washington, D.C., do a lot on behalf of ag retailers. And as you and I discussed, a good chunk of our audience is in the ag retail space, and we do a lot of business in that space. So I'm excited to share some of your insights on intentional leadership and beyond. So glad to have you here. You get the same opening question that everybody does, Darren. So what's it mean for you to be intentional?
Well, for me, it's making a conscious effort to accomplish something. It's easy sometimes when you get busy with the details of things that are going on to kind of let the stream carry you where the stream will carry you. And so for me, being intentional is sticking that rudder in, sticking that oar in, and steering intentionally to an outcome that you want to have. And it's something that, within our team, I'm continually working on ways to make sure that when somebody brings me a problem, I don't just deal with it in the moment. I follow up to make sure that it actually gets resolved and that it's sustainably resolved. So that's a pretty good example of being intentional around that one kind of a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I could not agree more. Let's talk a little bit about your role specifically. Share a little bit about, if you would, for the audience, what is ARA? Who is Darren Kopic? Why does it all matter? What is it? Because I've been around it for a long time. I'm very familiar, but I'm also, I'm guessing a lot of people probably maybe don't pay as close of attention. So yeah, give us a little background on your organization and yourself.
Sure, happy to do that. So the Agricultural Retailers Association represents retailers and distributors of agricultural inputs. So anything from fertilizer and seed to crop protection products, agronomy services, scouting, anything that a grower needs to produce a crop can be found at our member companies. And so our place in the universe, so to speak, is to represent those companies. They come in all shapes and sizes: private, co-op, publicly held, family business, any number of outlets, and anywhere in the country from California specialty crops and Florida specialty crops to my home out in the Northwest, corn and soybeans and cotton in the Midwest and Mid-South, and everything. So we get involved in a lot of issues, but it's usually around things that matter to that local retail outlet's profitability. So driver regulations, fertilizer storage regulations, bulk chemical storage regulations, certification of drivers, all kinds of things that deal with that local outlet. And right now, one of the things we're working on in the Farm Bill is to try to get the certified agronomists that are working within the industry to be able to be service providers under NRCS contracts, get paid for doing things like writing conservation plans. And I think we're in a position to, if the Farm Bill ever moves, I think we're in good position to have that provision in the Farm Bill. So the two reasons that a company joins typically is advocacy, like what I just described, and also networking. So our annual conference, being able to connect with other members in other parts of the country and compare notes about things, to be educated together, recognize excellence in the industry. Those are the kinds of things that we provide to ag retailers.
Very good. Well, great, great description, and that's sounds like some good news for some of those agronomists that might be able to add a little bit to their roster. Not that anybody's looking for a lot more work to do, but if they can get paid more.
That's the key, is being able to do the service and get paid for it.
Exactly. So good. Well, I'm curious what you're hearing from your members around the talent retention, the talent attraction in that space. If you guys get involved, I know you guys provide some programming to your members along a variety of things. So just curious what you're hearing. What are some of the challenges that you're hearing from your membership?
This one issue of people is the perennial issue that comes up every year. Mm-hmm. It was true before COVID. It's true after COVID. People aren't able to find the folks that they need to run the businesses at any level of the business. It's not just in the warehouse or who's driving the floater and the applicator. It's even future leaders of the business itself. there's the population that's available in rural America that came from farm backgrounds or from related backgrounds is getting smaller and smaller. And so our members are having to look at several different strategies to deal with that. One is to partner with local schools as soon as they can, whether it's high school FFA programs or 4-H programs or community colleges, to get their company and the opportunities that they offer out there in front of people before they make career decisions. It's maybe recruiting people that are coming back from military service that are looking for something new to do. And some of it's going to be automation. It's the challenge of getting all these things done. If we can remove some of the things that are routine, repetitive, and have a robot do those or some other kind of automation service, then we can focus the human talent that we do have in the areas where it adds the most value.
Yeah, it's really, really, really interesting. So is there, from your end of it, are there any regulatory hurdles that get in the way or that could be alleviated that help this along? And I'm thinking about things like migrant help, or bringing. I know a lot of our customers bring in folks from South Africa.
Yep.
Yeah, on some special visas, right? So yeah, just curious if there's anything you guys see or get involved, or any other solutions that way that you're seeing.
So the whole issue of farm labor, migrant labor, H-2A, is one that's perennially on the table here. And I remember somebody asking Secretary Tom Vilsack about that about a year ago at a meeting that I was attending, and his response was, "Look, we all know it needs to be done. It's just nobody's got the spine to do it." So I think if it was just something that we could carve out for agriculture or for a small solution set, we might be able to get something done with H-2A. But as soon as you tie it with immigration and the border and all the other issues that come along, it becomes a political football that nobody can handle. So, we continue to chip away at it and try to make use of that. We've got an increasing number of member companies who do use H-2A for filling some of those labor gaps, and I think that's going to continue and probably get bigger. But unfortunately, we haven't cracked the nut yet about how to really streamline that and make it easier to use.
Well, it's a big challenge for everybody. Obviously, we work with companies to try and help them enhance their cultures, build better employee development programs so that they can hopefully retain the good talent that they do have, attract others. Some of our clients have gotten really creative in looking for local talent in other ways, trying to bring people from outside the ag industry and teach them, some ag and help them learn how to do jobs well, right? So the reality is, at the end of the day, we all have to get creative and we got to get better.
Well, and we do offer a suite of professional development programs that all of our member companies have access to. It includes a management academy that we do with Purdue. In the past, it's included a crisis communications program that's kind of ready to go again once we get enough interest put together to run it again. There's a program that we do with Syngenta to do some advocacy training. So there's several different things that we could put together a pretty good program for a company that doesn't have that internally as a professional development path for their people.
Good to know. Good to know, because I know at least I talk to a lot of those buyers that are looking to provide. We don't provide all the things that a company would need, and I'd be happy to make those connections. So appreciate you mentioning it. Let's talk about culture a little bit, and I think this is kind of an interesting thing because we could go a lot of different ways with it. And but I'm interested in what So the question is around, what does it mean, or what does it take to build intentional culture? Maybe we start there. I would love to hear about how you operate your organization in creating a great, a culture within which, people can be actively engaged and want to, on your team there at ARA. Let's start with that. And then I want to move later on into how do you operate that inside the DC culture? How do you operate that inside a member culture where you have a lot of opinions from those members and different things? But let's talk about your team and your policy or your ways about creating intentional culture at ARA.
So you look at it in kind of two different buckets, if you will. One is the culture that's around the board and the volunteers and the whole operation of that side of the business, the governance and the things that we do. And then there's the culture within the team. But I think for both of those, the fundamental characteristic, the foundation has to be trust. all the way around. So, the board knows that I'm going to tell them what I think. They know that the financial information that we put forward to them is accurate. And there's just a foundation there where we know we can be candid and exchange things back and forth. And I think the same thing applies within the team too. If there's a fundamental trust among the team members and know that we've got each other's back, if that's in place, everything builds on top of that layer. And so for us, it's been providing some opportunities, even with an outside facilitator who's an expert in some of these issues, to come in and just talk with us, lead us through some strategic planning and annual goal planning, but also along the way, address some team health questions and talk about some stuff that sometimes isn't easy to talk about, but needs to be talked about for us to maintain that trust and build the team going forward.
Sure. Good stuff. Well, talk a little bit about the culture in DC, and I know this is a bomb waiting to go off. I mean, there's a lot of opinions and a lot of emotion, that roll in there. But what I'm interested in mostly is, how do you maintain the culture that you want inside of a culture that can be so volatile? There can be so many different opinions. There can be so many different ways of looking at things, and there's so much attention on that space. I'm just curious if that if that ever becomes an issue, and how you guys deal with that.
It hasn't really affected our internal team culture that I'm aware of. It's a very partisan, entrenched political debate around town where it's pretty hard to find middle ground on some issues. And if you do try to do that, those that do often get attacked from their extreme flanks. And if they're political people, may have a primary opponent in the next election because they try to reach across the aisle. To me, that's one of the saddest things I've seen in the 22 years I've been in Washington, is to watch that partisan divide split and split and split some more, where the people that used to be moderates that you could go to and work out compromises just aren't in office anymore. Sure. But for us, we've pretty well been able to say, this is ARA, this is what we do, this is our team, we're going to take care of things within our group. And we know we're going to go out there and fight the battles on these issues, and some of them we're going to win and some of them we're going to lose. But you just can't take any of that stuff too personally, or take yourself too seriously, and still be able to do that. Members frequently come up to me and say, I'm glad you're the one that's living in Washington, because I couldn't put up with all that stuff. And you just kind of learn to live with it.
Yeah. It seems unenviable, right? And I don't foresee myself wanting to go do it anytime soon. I'll stay 4 hours south of you down here in Raleigh. But we appreciate the work that you're doing, because we know it's important. Is it, and this is just a pure curiosity on my point, from my part, is it any different during an election year like this? Like, how does your job shift and change when some of the people you've been working with aren't going to be there? We're going to have a new president this time next year, obviously, and we'll be 5 months into it. So yeah, just curious, does that affect how your strategy, or how you guys go about doing what you're doing? Or do you just focus on the day-to-day, like, hey, Farm Bill is the big thing, like right now, let's go to work on that?
So it's a little bit of both. So there are some legislative achievements or regulatory achievements that we want to get completed as soon as we can. For the Farm Bill, the authorization of the past bill is over, and we're kind of on an extension path at the moment. And so we'd like to be able to get something that we can all be proud of and that would be in place for 5 years. The closer you get to November of a year that's divisible by 4, the more difficult it gets, because everybody's attention turns to the election, and it's hard to even get bills passed that rename post office after people, because all they want to do is campaign and posture for the upcoming election.
Right.
But we still focus on what we're trying to get done with the current political environment that we have, any initiatives that we have with like EPA's career staff that are going to transcend whatever election happens. While at the same time thinking about, okay, if depending on what happens in November, what opportunities does that provide to us to play some offense on some issues? Where do we need to be thinking about shoring up the defense a little bit, or adjusting the strategy? So you kind of think about both at the same time.
Yeah, that's my strategic mind turns on when I start thinking about these things. I'm like, well, is there an advantage to waiting, or is there a significant disadvantage to waiting on things like the Farm Bill specifically, right?
It depends on the issue. And in the Farm Bill, there's also a budget implication. And that is that if they don't get the bill out of at least one of the committees before May 31st, the Congressional Budget Office rescores the farm bill, and what is now the first $1 trillion farm bill will probably become the first 1.2 or $1.3 trillion farm bill. And it gets more difficult to pass at that point. So you see the chairman of the House committee trying really hard to get a bill out before Memorial Day. And I think that's the driving reason why.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and I can't imagine that those extra billions are necessarily going to your ag retail members.
No, it's 85% plus of that entire bill is nutrition programs.
Right.
Very little of it gets to the farm.
Yeah. Well, we could, I'm sure, sit and chew the fat on all those things for a long time, and maybe people will want me to more. But I want to learn more about Darren as well from a from a leadership perspective. So, Darren, let's talk a little bit about that. What's been one of the biggest hurdles that you've had to overcome in your role?
Oh, that's a great question. Probably, I'm not one who likes to create conflict. I'm not afraid of conflict, but I don't like to create it, and I don't like to be in it. And so sometimes I will allow things to continue or to happen that, with a little bit of direct intervention at the front end, would solve a lot of problems down the road and save some agony for all concerned. And so that's one of the things we started talking about being intentional. That's one of the things that I'm really trying to be intentional about, is watch for those. And if there's something where I just need to say, this is the answer, so that we don't have to wrestle with all the other stuff, trying to be more intentional about doing that.
Yeah, I think that's a good lesson for a lot of people to learn. We live in sort of a wishy-washy culture in America these days, where people don't want to offend, right? We don't want to push too hard. We don't want to, it becomes very hard sometimes to stand for something, or just at the end of the day, be the one who makes the decision because nobody else wants to.
And as long as you're convinced in the position that you have, and you firmly, truly, genuinely believe that it's right, I can make hard decisions and live with those consequences and sleep at night. So that's kind of my approach to it.
We need more people to develop that skill set. That's for sure. So that's biggest hurdle. What's been one of your biggest wins?
Also a difficult question. To me, I don't really ever point at things that I personally did as a leader, because it's never just me that makes it happen. One of the best pictures I can draw probably goes all the way back to when I was playing high school basketball. And I was not, an outstanding player. I was in the middle because I could shove harder on the opponent's center than anybody else could and gather a few rebounds. But the play that made me the most happy was not a shot that I made or a shot that I blocked. It was a pass that I still to this day don't know how it got through the defense to one of the other guys who was able to score a layup on the play. And that's the kind of way I feel about the things that we do here at ARA2. When our team members shine, when they accomplish things, or we do things together as a team, those are the kind of things that make me most proud. If you were to point to a couple of just things that have developed and that we've done while I've been here, I think probably the Responsible Ag program, and I'm wearing the shirt today, that we did following the West fertilizer explosion, where this program provides some tools to retailers to know at a very low cost, how am I doing in compliance with federal regulations that apply to my facilities? And that was not an easy process to get that set up. It took us several iterations to get it right and to get members on board. But in the end, the product has been very good. It's a going concern now and growing well, and providing a really valuable service to the industry. And so those are the kind of things that I think I would point to as good accomplishments for the organization while I've been here.
Well, it's a great program, and with the intention on the right place, right? I mean, sometimes intentional leadership means we have to stick with it even when it gets hard.
Yeah, when you know it's the right thing, even though not everybody wants to be there, you just keep pushing, and hopefully everybody comes around.
Right, because that is leadership. It's not about being liked. Unfortunately, it's not. It may look like a popularity contest from what we see in our political world, but it's really not, right?
Or it shouldn't be. If it is, it shouldn't be. We'd have better leadership if it wasn't.
You betcha. Great. Well, who's been somebody that you've looked up to or admired over the course of your career?
gosh, there are lots of people that have been kind of role models or mentors or just good people to rely on. I think of Ted McKinney, who's now over at NASDA as their president and CEO, but I've known him for 20 years when he was at Dow AgroSciences, and I was with Wheat Growers when I first came to town. There's a guy named John Oates who used to work for U.S. Wheat Associates back when I was in Oregon that helped me in the early stages of my career get kind of oriented and lined out right. And then there are some colleagues that I turn to here in town, people like Luther Marquardt at the American Sugar Beet Association. Luther is somebody I've also known for a long time. He actually did some of the training for our National FFA officer team way, way, way back.
Okay.
So there's people like that that have made, little contributions along the way, and I'm not coming close to naming all of them, but there are a lot, and we stand on the shoulders of them every day.
One of the reasons this question is in so many of the interviews that I do is because I want to draw people's attention to those people that have contributed to their development along the way, whether it was a mom or a dad or a grandpa. We've had a lot of those in the 75 plus interviews that I've done for this show, to icons in the industry. Ted McKinney, what a great example. I remember meeting Ted I'm sure wouldn't remember me, but I just, as an FFA member, distinctly remember when I was still wearing the jacket. So this is going back 25 years, but I got to meet him when he was at Dow.
Yeah.
And those people like that, those people who have been so intentional for those of us that have grown up and now, assume these roles of leadership. They have done so much intentional leadership there that has really impacted. I mean, maybe it's just one chance meeting or one, FFA Foundation event where I got to run into this guy, but man, like, it made such a big impact.
And chances are that whoever it was that made the impact may not remember it. It may have been a long time ago. It may have been just a one-off thing, but the fact that they took time to invest a little bit of time in you pays dividends down the road that they'll have no idea where it came from, but it's significant.
And it's important to remember that there were those people for us, and now we need to be those people for others.
Exactly.
So will you take that moment out to ask one more question, and just be present for someone? I mean, there's a lot of intention behind that. So yeah, very good. If you've got any time out there amidst all the things that you're doing, do you do any reading or listen to any podcasts that you recommend for folks?
Well, your podcast, of course, we should start with that one.
Let's start with the Intentional Agribusiness Leader podcast.
That's right. That's right. So I think probably the most impactful book, I'll give you two of them. One's going to be an outlier. The most impactful business book I've read is Good to Great by Jim Collins. Yep. I've reread that book several times, and I still go back to it for just perspective on things that I'm doing, and am I measuring up to the criteria of a level 5 leader? Are we doing things that are in our hedgehog concept? The flywheel concept. All those things are great concepts to look at your organization, your business with. And so I continue to use that as a resource. The other one that's going to be the weird outlier is a book called Atlas Shrugged. And it is like reading an entire encyclopedia. It's a huge book, 1,200 pages, micro print, no pictures. And so when I recommend it to people, I usually say, try to find the Spark Notes version. But the reason I recommend it is that in the book, there's an economy and companies and industries that are trying to succeed and thrive and grow. And well-meaning government bureaucrats, not anybody trying to create harm intentionally, but motivated by what they think is a good thing to do, regulate this railroad into the ground and destroy the economy in the process. And you look at some of the things that are going on in places like California today, and you think, I'm watching Atlas Shrugged be lived out in these economies. People just, for some reason, don't think all the way through to, okay, if I do this, then where does that path lead me to? They think about the first step, but not the next 7. And so it's been helpful for me to kind of lean back on that as a reference and say, let's not do that.
Yeah, that's a great book. I am about let's call it a third of the way into the audiobook. It is a 60-hour audiobook, Darren.
That's huge. Yeah.
It's taking it. And I'll forget about it, but I'll listen to it just like when I'm on an airplane, got a long ride, and I'm just like, I'm sort of done. My mind needs to shut down for the day, and I just need to go listen to something. And I really do enjoy it. It's fascinating, and really I ought to probably actually read it as well, because it's really an iconic work, right? I mean, as far as like when you think about a book that's I mean, which I think Ayn Rand wrote this like in the 1930s, right?
Yeah, a long time ago.
It's almost 100 years old, but now you read it and it's just as relevant today as it was 100 years ago.
It was one of those things when I picked up the book, it was one of those being intentional things. I'm going to read this book.
Yeah.
Kind of like when I picked up War and Peace or Crime and Punishment, or some of those other books. These are classics. Moby Dick. I'm going to read this because it's a classic, but sometimes it really was hard to slog your way through it.
Yep, absolutely. It's a big one, but it's a good story, right? I mean, it's a lot of good story. There's a lot of different storylines, and so definitely recommend that one, because it'll help you understand what's going on in the world today for sure. All right, good. What do you do to keep your energy up? What do you do to stay productive?
So for me, it's about changing of scenery. It's even if it's a matter of getting up and walking around the block at lunchtime to get some energy and some fresh air, or I find traveling and visiting with members to be really rejuvenating. If I was a 5-day a week, 8-9 hour guy in the office, I'd be crawling the walls. And so what I really enjoy is getting out and interacting with people, whether it's out to speak at a member meeting or a state convention, or do a member visit, or whatever it is. Those are the kind of things that help. My wife has provided a way for me to energize myself and exercise at home. We now have horses on the property. And so my job is to run the tractor to scoop the horse manure and get it into the pile, and do some other things like that, spray the weeds in the pasture and so forth.
Sure.
So a lot of evenings and weekends are spent doing things like that. And it's funny, I grew up as a farm kid, and now getting back out on that tractor all these years later, it's therapeutic. It's relaxing to get out there and spend a few hours doing that. And so I really enjoy it.
I hear a lot of people say that, and it's true for me. I don't have a tractor sitting out here, but just going out to mow the lawn, I can run a machine, and for an hour to sort of disconnect from everything else that's going on. And I know a lot of my clients too, they invest time trying to explain to their wives why they'd rather go drive a tractor than sit and watch Netflix.
Yeah. Well, you can still put headphones in and listen to podcasts or books or whatever while you're out there.
Yeah, but there's something about being on being in that state, right, of moving things around, driving a piece of equipment that just brings you back to what all of us probably spent, hundreds and thousands of hours growing up doing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So good stuff. All right, what do you want to improve on this year? What's got to get better for Darren?
Probably be more intentional about exercise. Because I get so busy, and I'll make a plan that I'm going to go do this, and then I'll get to the office or get to wherever I'm working, and boom, I'm on. So just making time for things that as Stephen Covey called sharpening the saw. Mm-hmm. I don't always do that, and I need to get better at it.
Yeah, I often say that, Covey, I mean, so here's actually an interesting fun fact. It took Covey 10 years to write that book. And it's been to date really one of, if not the most successful books in the history of personal and professional development.
I didn't realize it took 10 years. That's quite an investment of time.
And it's continued to be a bestseller. I mean, Franklin Covey as a company is a $300 million a year organization. Okay, publicly traded. Now, if I was him, and I could go back 50 years ago when he started writing this, I would sharpen the saw, which is habit number 7. I would make it number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Be based on the results that we would see. And this is a message directly to the clients that I work with, the people that go through our programs. They know what we stand for at Thrive Today. It's called Thrive Today. That's what our company's called, not Survive the Day.
Right. Much more fun to be a thriver.
Well, it is, but it requires that you get out and that we incorporate this into all of our training. What is one of the number one things that our clients ask for is more help on time management, more help on work-life balance. Well, there's no real such thing as work-life balance. You have to prioritize the things that are the most important to you. And the reality is, if we look across the broad scope of agriculture, we have not done a good job of prioritizing health.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And so that's something that we've taken a stand for, and I mean, we actually incorporate it into our programs. But it's I'm glad to hear you say it, because more people need to hear guys like you say it. Like, this is important. We're going to do something about it. We got to improve that this year. So
And I noticed that if I don't do that and I let that slip, it starts to affect my productivity at work. So it's not just about feeling and mental energy. It's about accomplishment too.
Right. And this is, our attitude, right? Because we all grew up in that, just get up and get her done sort of atmosphere, right? On the farm or wherever we grew up around this. So it's very easy to think of that time as selfish, when in reality,
Right.
you're actually doing the people that you serve a service, because you're making a little bit of time to improve your capacity. You're going to be less short with people. You're going to be more clear-minded. You're going to have a greater capacity, physical, mental, emotional capacity to go through the day well. It's important. It's something we got to work on in this industry for sure.
Right. Right.
So, talk to me a little bit about vulnerability and creating that intentional work environment. It's our last question of the day, Darren, but we bring this up because, we think in the ag industry, we probably need to do a better job of this overall. We talk about it. I think it's time more people be about it, but curious on your take on how important vulnerability is in being able to create an intentional work environment.
So we talked a lot about trust earlier, and
Yeah.
vulnerability is I think a key characteristic in being able to establish a trusting environment, where people know that you're willing to take criticism for things that you did that didn't work out, or mistakes that you made, or whatever. Uh, and so for me, it's important to always have my door open, to always listen to whatever somebody wants to come share with me, and talk it out. So I think to make that platform on which you build a good organization, have trust be that lower plank, vulnerability of the leadership, and really everybody on the team is an important piece of making that happen.
Oh, very good. Very good answer. Well, Darren, it's been a great conversation today here on the Intentional Agribusiness Leader podcast. Any last thoughts that you'd like to share with the group? And then how do we find out more or get engaged with ARA?
I appreciate the invitation to come and share. It made me think about some things that I sometimes get busy working and don't think about. But this is a really great industry to be working in. And I don't just say that because I work in it, but the people that are throughout agriculture, whether it's livestock, crops, ag retailers, distributors, manufacturers, are top-notch, honorable, genuine people by and large. And it's just a great group of folks to work with and for. And I've enjoyed every bit of it. And then as far as engaging with ARA, the easiest way to find us is on our website, aradc.org. And all of our contact information is there. A lot of information about who we are and what we do. And if anybody has questions, I'd love to have them reach out to me and we'll follow up.
Fantastic. Well, we will make sure to link that up in the show notes and send people over that way. Darren, thanks for doing it. Thanks for advocating for agriculture and ag retail up there in DC.
You bet, Mark. Thanks for what you do too.